Welcome to the Culture Docent with Dr. Carr, where real stories spark real change. Together, we'll break down culture, leadership, and inclusion and rebuild them into something transformative. This is where conversations become movements. This is the Culture Docent.
Hey, y'all. I am Dr. Carr, the Culture Docent, here to help you navigate and curate the experiences you want to have. So this is episode 2. I'm so happy you joined us for episode 1. We had a great time. I hope you really enjoyed it. Now we're going to be talking about career pivots in the age of GPT. So today's focus is all about the evolution of career transitions with a special look at how Gen AI, so generative AI, right, is shaping the way we work and the choices we make. So this conversation is extremely important. It's so good. It's so packed with insight. It's so packed with insight that we have to divide it into 2 parts, so that you make sure that you're getting all the information that you need without taking up your entire day, right? So you're going to hear part 1 of this discussion with Erica Shoemate, who is an AI and tech policy strategist and AI 2030 fellow. So I promise you the second half is just going to be just as powerful. So make sure that you tune back in for part 2. Before we dive in, I want you to make sure that you head over to 𝐚𝐤𝐡𝐞1003.com and check out the 𝐚𝐤𝐡1003 store, where we've curated some of our favorite picks for you. So trust me, those are some things that you don't want to miss out on. All right, Erica, tell us a little about yourself.
Awesome. Yes. Hi. So excited to be here on your podcast and looking forward to the conversation today. Again, my name is Erica Shoemate. I am, as you mentioned, a global policy strategist and AI 2030 Global Policy Fellow as well, the AI 2030 Institute. And I'm also a newly named founding member and policy co-chair of the Maternal and Infant Health Equity Coalition here in the DMV, hosted by the March of Dimes, where I also serve as a maternal health ambassador. And one of the biggest things, like thinking about my intro, is I bring a systems approach to everything that I do, with a background that includes in national security and intelligence, and also major tech companies focused on the tech and emerging tech policy space. And also I work as a career pivot strategist, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today, and helping women, especially Black women, build careers that are rooted in purpose, protection, and power. And whether I'm building ethical AI frameworks or mentoring someone through a major career shift, my goal is simple: don't panic, pivot. And the future is something we aren't waiting for, and it's something we're actually shaping, and it's happening in real time. So that's a little bit about me.
Yes, I love that. Don't panic, pivot. I will be saying that as my mantra. All right, so we're going to jump into it. In the interest of transparency, if you watched last week's episode, you'll know how important that is for me and for us to maintain relationships. But it was a little bit of a challenge for me when preparing for this episode. So for, all of y'all's awareness, Erica already knows because she was actually present at my defense. But for my dissertation, I used an interpretive phenomenological approach to understand algorithmic bias in HR practices. So specifically hiring and performance management, and its impact on the career trajectory of Black professionals. So it's a lot of words to say that basically I was looking at, mid-career Black professionals. It was really important to look at that kind of space, partly because that was the space that, I was in at the time. But also there's just something special about that mid-career space that's different than if you are an established executive, or if you are more junior and coming into the workforce. So you're very different when you're in that mid-career. But talking to Black professionals that willingly used AI or consented to, having their info collected by an organization who uses AI in some aspect of the HR process. So, if you're applying to a job, click in that little box that say, yes, you can, use my info in your AI process. And all of this was done from an inclusive leadership framework, inclusive leadership lens. That is also an expertise of mine. And one thing that we will always talk about on this show is inclusive leadership, right? So
Yes.
It was just very, I had a really interesting findings, some great insights. And it was just I just harken back to that, not to, not just to demonstrate like I have some awareness of, this topic, but also because I had to check my biases, right? I had to check my biases when I did that. I had to check my biases now, where it's like, I'm not actually a proponent of AI use, right? Like personally, right? I don't, everybody
Yeah,
gonna do
yeah,
what they
yeah.
want to do, but me, right? So,
Right.
and in order to have, these types of conversations, you have to check that out, right? And just say like, okay, this is how I feel, but I really am, I'm a lifelong learner. Lifelong learner and very open-minded, of course. And so I always want to hear other perspectives. I want to educate myself because when information changes, you have the right to change your opinion, right? And like
Absolutely.
you should
You
have
should
that
change your
insight.
opinion.
Yes. And so
Where are we now?
that's really what I wanted to do and make sure that, I didn't bring all of that extra in for me, right? And so also, it is Gen AI, right? Like we are talking about generative AI. We're not going to be talking about all the other things, but generative AI for this conversation, right? If you want to talk about those things, me and Erica could chat with you later,
Right.
but we're going to be talking about Gen AI for this conversation. But, it's in conversations, daily conversations at work, on
Hmm.
socials, in our personal lives, right? Like, so I wanted to make sure that I came to this convo with an open heart and an open mind. And of course, invite not only a friend, but an expert, right? Someone that I've known almost 10 years.
Yeah,
So we can talk about this candidly and with care. Um, so
absolutely.
we are going for it. So thinking contextually, right? Current job market, insane. It is crazy.
Hmm.
If you haven't had to apply for a job within, I would say probably the last year, like not even just
Yeah,
9 months, like last year,
yeah.
you need to count yourself highly blessed and well, blessed and highly favored, right?
A
So
favorite, yes.
also just go ahead and update your resume. Do it now.
You read it.
Stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. Okay, just do it so you
Because
have
it's back.
that.
Yeah.
But it's also just important to understand that landscape, just so you can check in with loved ones, check in with your colleagues, right?
Mhm.
Understand what's going on. Check out the news because if you've been wondering like about layoffs, if you've been wondering about
Yeah.
where all of your Black female colleagues have gone, let me tell you that as of July, right? We're now in September, but as of
Right.
July, there were more than 300,000 Black women that have left the job market, right?
Hmm.
So, and unfortunately, I know probably about 10 personally that have, been affected by this current job market. I actually just found out about another friend yesterday. So it's
Mm.
very timely conversation. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the unemployment rate of 4.2% rose to 6.3%. That's just for Black women, right? That's the
Yeah.
highest it's been since October of 2021. And we're not really seeing this like slow down for any Black employees. And then
No.
additional context, right? It's like, the great resignation occurred in the earlier days of the pandemic. We did start to see a little bit of that level off in 2023. But during, that time, that really opened the door for businesses to start thinking about automation, right? And that is one of I would say, a catalyst, right? Like it was already kind of
Yeah.
working in the background, but that was definitely a catalyst for like this boom in robotics and in artificial intelligence. So, all of the
Absolutely.
technologies that were primarily relegated to like research centers and technologists, right? Like all the scientists that were doing that stuff, or all the nerds like me that were learning about it, right? Now it's available to the general public in like this myriad of ways, right? So
Hmm.
if we're thinking about us for like organizations, and again, this show is always about whatever industry you're in, whatever step you are in your journey, right? We don't have a preference for like if you're in corporate, you could be working retail, like all of these topics are definitely of use and valuable. And so when I'm thinking about all of these ways that people are using AI, right? Like you could be self-employed, you could have started an entire company, that is
Yeah.
based on AI or bringing AI tools, to specified markets, right? Um, Folks are using it to tailor resumes, to do cover letters, helping applicants navigate the ATS, so the applicant tracking system. And that's really only highlighting, the uses for prospective candidates, right? So
Yeah.
organizations, of course, have access to this AI as well. So, hiring teams, the IT shop, whatever, right? Like they all have
Hmm.
this ability to be able to use AI too. And so we have AI kind of coming on both sides, good or bad, right? That's
Or
kind of what it is.
indifferent,
That's where
right?
we're at, right? But I would love for you to tell
Hmm.
me, what you've personally been seeing in this job market over the last 5 years, share a little bit about your own career pivots, and then, what have you
Yeah.
personally found to be the most valuable in your career pivot in incorporating the use of emerging technology?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Dr. Carr, about this kind of transition, like over the last 5 years, we've seen it all, right? So, we head into the pandemic in March of 2020. Things are shutting down pretty rapidly. Everyone is being asked to work from home, who can work from home for most corporate environments, right? We know that there are some essential workers that still, healthcare, that still have to physically go in to be of service in their professional roles. And so you see this rolling out, and then to your point around like the great resignation starts to then happen, because what you're starting to see is initially you have a lot of corporate companies, even government at the time, being able to work home where you can, short of you being in like very sensitive classified environments. And then you also this return to work, because now a big part of the population is starting to get vaccinated or are vaccinated, round one, round two. And now it's like, okay, you need to come back to work, because the business economy around a lot of where these headquarters are for certain corporations are being impacted, because no one is going to lunch, right? No lunch, no happy hour, any of those things. And so then you have people like no more, particularly a lot of women. We also have this sandwich generation that's happening. And so you have caregivers, like they're not all the time women, but majority of the time they are women, right? And whether that's a caregiver to a parent, someone in your family, or it's a child, things start to really shift for folks who have this responsibility. And honestly, on top of that, you have people that are also equally burned out. And so you see this great resignation that's happening. And then around that end of like, as we get into like late spring, late summer, early fall, you start to see the layoffs in tech start to pick up tremendously, right? And it's catching people by storm, and it is becoming a whole ordeal, to the point it is taking, when the layoffs happen, people aren't able to still get jobs 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 2.5 years. Like I know people who were still in the job market 2+ years later, like either underemployed or unemployed. And now you're seeing companies where if you are seeing layoffs, it's not necessarily because of their profit margins or, year over year data you're looking at. It is just because companies have made a business decision to be more lean due to somewhat automation, not all of it, but some of it is automation. Some of it is this anticipation of we are shifting where we're making our business impact. And needless to say, though, it is impacting people's households. And we also know, exactly to what you said, Dr. Carr, that Black women, like there's a lot of federal government workers being laid off very indiscriminately in many ways, right? But we also know that Black women, unfortunately, are bearing the brunt of these extreme and rapid layoffs, whether they are, legal, not illegal, all that stuff. It doesn't matter. People are laid off and they're not getting checks, don't have insurance, or some people have done the deferred resignation. What we see happening, and I want people that are listening is to know that a lot of this job market loss, particularly for the Black community and particularly women, and we know that historically in the Black communities that women are also the most educated across any demographic. So you kind of layer all these things on top of like today, September today. And so if you are here in the DMV, or if you're not, a fun fact I should share is, did you know that the two wealthiest Black counties in the US sit right where I actually live, the DMV area? And so you have Charles County, Maryland is number one. You have Prince George's County, or PG County, is number two. And PG County kind of held its own for a long time as number one. And so if you think about that, and you think about the federal government being made up of over like 18% or so of Black people in general, and then about 12%, 12 plus percent are made up of women, none of this is by coincidence. This is all intentional. And so that really brought me to exactly what you're talking about. Like, what are we seeing? The framework around Don't Panic, Pivot is because it really paralyzed a lot of our community, to go from having your, what we're, always told, why would you leave your good government job? And Dr. Carr, you and I both coming from the government, like I left 5 years ago and pivoted to big tech, and now pivoting into my own boutique consulting and strategy firm as well. And so think about all of those things that are happening. You have many people now that don't have a job, hard to get a job. The market is not easy. And you talk about what we're seeing. And I bring it to the point about generative AI. All hope is not lost, though. One thing that I talk about as we are coming up now, like, that was then 5 years ago versus where we are now, and now the fall of 2025, is we have to start thinking differently. And I believe that generative AI, from a career positioning perspective, it really levels the playing field for a lot of people who may not have the ability to get them a career coach, who may not have the ability to get a resume that's $500 to be redone. And now you can use some of the GPT that are out there and really be able to hone in on your skills, and beyond just, making your resume prettier, making your LinkedIn more optimized. You are also able to then think about what skill sets that I have or do have that are transferable, that I can create my own income from. And that is where you can actually leverage GPT to have that conversation, create a strategy around my own transferable skills and who needs those skills. Where is there a market gap? You can use GPT to help you. And now remember, though, the caveat is GPT makes mistakes. Yeah, you see the small underlining of that, but also remembering that just to check the facts around it. If it's giving you stats, data, just making sure that the sources are accurate that you may be getting. But that is one way I kind of see the trend changing. You're seeing a lot more people now using GPT to, as you talked about, this resume updating, but it's all about, there should be some healthy skepticism around it. I also say that I think it is so important that all of us at least attempt to interact with this generative AI, just so that you understand how it works versus your assumptions of how it works, how you think it works. And as someone who is neurodivergent, I also believe that for me personally, it allows me to get all of my thoughts out like GPT does. And I'm a writer, but it also helps me to streamline my points. And if I'm kind of getting away from my point, it kind of helps to reel me back in. And so those are some of the things I think about. And I also bring the lens coming from national security and intelligence. Those things never leave you. I'm also always thinking about operational security, where I put my information, my personal identifiable information, making sure not to put those things, as you're thinking about, from where I was to where I am now. And that experience can be very vast. And so that is really, I know it's a very long-winded answer, but that is really some of the things that I have seen the trend over the last 5 years and taken into the GPT world. Also ways that we can now pivot in 2025 as a collective using GPT.
All right, welcome back to episode 2, Career Pivots in the Age of GPT. In part 1, we began, exploring how career transitions are evolving with the rise of generative AI. And so those insights were, of course, extremely valuable, and we wanted to keep that conversation going. So what you're about to hear is part 2 of my discussion with Erica Shoemate. So if you thought that first half was extremely powerful, you will find the second half just as deep. Definitely just as packed with these key takeaways and this perspectives. And so before we dive into part 2, don't forget to visit 𝐬𝐚𝐤𝐴1003.com and check out the 𝐬𝐚𝐤𝐵1003 store, where we've curated some of our favorite picks just for you.
Your docent with Dr. 𝐂𝐤 Carr. We'll be back next Tuesday. Don't miss it. Questions or comments? Email tcd@𝐓𝐿𝐾institute.com. And don't forget, check out our curated store at 𝐬𝐚𝐤𝐵1003.com.